Oh, made some good sausage. Today we're going to be making some fresh pork brats featuring our number 532 Badger Brat seasoning. This is a really nice seasoning. It comes with red peppers, garlic, caramelized onion, and a little bit of beer flavor. It's perfect for the Wisconsin style brat that we're going to be looking for today. For our meat block on this sausage, I'm going to be using a pork butt or a pork shoulder. I'm going to have to debone this one, but the reason I've chose this cut of meat is because it works really well with sausage. The fat content is high enough, it's going to keep our brat moist and super flavorful. First thing I got to do is break this open. I'm going to pat it dry just to get all those excess juices off, and then I'll cut it up into grinder appropriate size pieces, and I'm going to throw it back in the fridge to chill it off a little bit more before we start our grind. Now as I pat this dry, I see a few spots that I'm also going to have to trim up. There's some obvious bloodlines that I want to get out. I just don't want that flavor in our meat block. What makes this a little easier is that you can just cut pieces away from the bone because everything's going to get cut up into smaller pieces anyway, so you don't have to worry about digging the bone out necessarily all in one piece. Now that I have all the pork off the bone, I'm going to cut these into about 3-inch cubes. Roughly, it doesn't have to be perfect because these are going to go through the grinder. I weighed out how much meat we actually have so that I can weigh out how much seasoning we actually need to use. Our 532 Badger Brat seasoning comes in a pack made for 25 pounds of sausage. We only have just over 10 here today, so I'm going to weigh out how much we need for 10 pounds. Now that we're all measured out, I'm going to set our pork back in the fridge to keep it nice and chilled before we start our grinding process, so I have time to set up our grinder. We're going to do a pretty standard 2-stage grind on our sausage. We're going to start with a 3/8 inch plate. And after that's done, we're going to reload the stuffer and change our plate out to a 3/16 for our second grind. First grind is done, and you can see it's pretty coarse, having only gone through that 3/8 inch plate. At this point, we're going to mix in our seasoning. I learned this trick from our master meat crafter friend, Mark Haney, and he says that it helps start that mixing process and it just gets a more even distribution of our seasoning. And when I'm mixing this, I just want to be really gentle. All I'm trying to do is distribute that seasoning throughout the meat. I'm not trying to get any level of protein extraction yet because I do have one more grind to go through. And then after that second grind is when we'll start adding our inclusions. So we're going to load up our grinder with a new plate and start the second grind. And lastly, we're going to send about a half a cup of ice through the grinder just to push out all that extra meat that might be stuck in the auger. Next steps are going to be to break this down, and then we're going to start adding our inclusions and mixing till we get that protein extraction so that we can stuff our sausages. I have here some white cheddar curds that I'm going to cut up into smaller pieces. The smaller pieces will fit through the stuffer a lot easier than something like this, and I'm going to mix those in with our meat block. This should give us a nice creamy, ooey gooey texture that's going to be really good in our brat. Along with the red pepper in the seasoning blend for our Badger Brat, we're going to have the white cheese curds, which is going to give us the red and white, the Wisconsin Badgers. And then for the last bit of Wisconsin flavor, we're going to be adding beer. And not just any beer, we're going to be adding Spotted Cow, which is a farmhouse beer from our very own New Glarus Brewing right here in Wisconsin. A 12-ounce bottle, so we're going to want 2/3 of that for 1 cup of beer. And what we're doing here is we're working the meat so we get that protein extraction. We're getting that last mix on the seasoning so we have a nice even distribution. We're also mixing the cheese so that is evenly distributed throughout the meat block. And there we are. Almost no movement off my hand. So the protein extraction is where we want it. So I'm going to load up our stuffer and start filling our casings. Got our sausage stuffer staged and ready for us. I set us up with a 1/2 inch horn, which is going to be good for our size casings that we're using. So at this point, I'm going to load up our stuffer with our meat block. And when I do this, I'm gonna place the meat in the middle of the stuffer and push it down so it works its way out towards the walls, and this will help us avoid air pockets. I'm gonna crank the plunger down until the meat comes about halfway through our horn, and then I'm gonna pull back on the pressure so we can load our casings. Right about there, pull back on the pressure. Now I'm gonna load up our casing and start stuffing. So these are a 32 to 35 millimeter natural hog casing that I'm going with today. I really like natural hog casings just for the snap and the bite that you get once they're cooked. I think it's a classic taste and feel. So this is what I like using. You can also use other casings. You can also use different sizes too, depending on your preference. But I really like these 32 to 35 natural hogs for my brats. I'm gonna pull some water through the casing, which is gonna give us one last rinse. It's also gonna use that water to lubricate the horn as I feed them on here. It should go on nice and smooth. I'm gonna put some extra water down on the table here so that when the sausage comes out, it doesn't stick to the table. I'm not gonna tie the end, that's just a personal preference. If you prefer to tie the end, just make a little knot right here before you start stuffing. But I like to just hold it and guide it through. And you're gonna have your left hand there to guide and make sure that the sausage is stuffing evenly into the casing. And as I get to the end of the casing here, I'm gonna give it about 4 inches and pull back on that pressure so it stops pumping out the meat block, and this will be the end. And then we're gonna go about every 5 or 6 inches, pinch, 5 or 6 inches, pinch, and spin, all right? And then we're gonna do that again, but we're gonna skip a link. 5 or 6 inches, 5 or 6 inches, skip. So we're only spinning one, but we're effectively getting 2 brats out of it. And then this one could go into either 3 smaller ones or 2 bigger ones. So we're gonna compress it a little bit from the end, and I think we're just gonna go for 2 bigger ones. The last one, you pinch and you spin, okay? Now we're gonna go through and check them all with our sausage pricker and to eliminate the air pockets. And all you do is poke. Don't go too deep because you don't want to rip the casing completely, but give it a little poke and then give it a gentle squeeze to work that air out. Some will have more air in them than others. Some won't have any air at all, so you just got to look for those air pockets as you go through. And see, this one's a little understuffed, so what we're going to do is we're going to give that a few extra spins because that'll pull the meat in and make it a better stuffed sausage. And then I'm gonna set these in the cooler overnight before I vac pack them. I do want them to dry out a little bit, and since I'm gonna vac pack them, I don't want too much moisture in that package, and it'll give the skins a little time to dry out, which will help us in the grilling process with that snap that we want. One of the advantages of this fresh bratwurst is that we can go straight onto the grill too. We don't need to rest or wait for smoking or curing or anything like that. So we're gonna throw a few of these on the grill at this point and give them a try. It's against PS seasoning policy to boil brats. Whether it's beer or any other liquid, you have the potential of actually drawing fats and flavors out of the brat rather than adding anything in. We also have the beer inclusion already in our brats, so we're gonna have plenty of flavor packed into these links. So after a few hours of grinding, seasoning, stuffing, we are ready to try these brats. I have them set up here in some buns. Toppings could be anything you want. If you want to put some sauce on them, if you want to put some raw or caramelized onions would be really good. I think these are going to stand alone just fine on the bun. So that's how I'm going to serve them. But first I want to try the sausage just by itself. So I have a link over here that I'm going to cut open because I want to see what it looks like on the inside with those curds. And this looks really great. Looks like we have good fat distribution, so it should be nice and juicy for us. That cheese looks nice and ooey gooey, and you can see the little red pepper in there as well, to give us the red and white of Badgers. That has to be one of the most tender brats I've ever made. And the flavor on top of it is just wonderful. It's got background pepper, the sweetness from the red pepper, and the caramelized onion flavor. That beer that we put in there gives it a little extra sweetness. And those cheese curds, they're nice and melty. It's a little different than a high temp cheese, but it plays really well in this sausage. For this recipe and more, including the products you've seen today, our 532 Badger Brat seasoning, high temp cheeses, and casings, head to psseasoning.com. Check us out on pretty much every social media platform. And if you liked this video, please click subscribe for many more videos just like it. Until next time, I'm Chef Jed. Thanks for watching. This is good though.